And if they don't go up, I'm still comfortable in saying how that is it. That is the word. Hello everybody, welcome back to the Young Fan Podcast. I'm joined by Jake and Tom. We're here to discuss the top 6 and the bottom 4, predicting, breaking down and discussing the crucial positions as we hit the business end of the season. Tom, how are you doing? The first time we've had a 3-way, I use that word loosely, but a 3-way on a video. We've been discussing the transfer window, and of course we've done 4 Sunday Lives. But Tom, how are you doing, mate? Excited?
I'm very excited, mate. I'm looking forward to this. I think we're in for the long haul. So sit back, relax, get some snacks and cup of tea, as Jake's probably got there ready to go. Yes, mate. Looking forward to it. Oh, it's a bottle of water, but it's a close second. Very much looking forward to it. And yeah, first time freeway. I think that's it's a nice way to describe it.
Lovely way of describing it. Couldn't think of a better word. And Jake, for you, the first time properly, is properly, isn't it? You sort of touched on live streams, and of course you were in the video, 24 supporters, 24 predictions. But the first time, the 3 of us, I think there's going to be some really interesting talking points, Jake.
Yeah, and do you know what? I don't think there are many more people, apart from Nappers, that I enjoy talking League One with.
Oh, come on. Stop it, you.
Come on.
So nice.
Look, I'm very happy. Also, obviously, involved in the fan corners, Jack, as well, which were really
Of course you
interesting
are. Of course
really fun as well. So, no, just happy to be back on and just good to be talking to you two. You're like my 2 favourite people at the moment. I can't get enough of you.
Oh.
So kind. Right, let's get into it. Let's talk about the relegation battle first, because like I said, the battle is a battle. I think it always gets described as a battle, but it's very, very tight down there. It's very, very close, bar one, unfortunately. Sorry for Irish Green Rovers. We'll come on to you. Let's come to you straight away. It hasn't been the best of seasons, has it, really? If we're being totally honest. Tom, we'll come to you straight away. For Irish Green Rovers, are we comfortable in saying they probably will be playing League 2 football next season?
Yes, and I think it's been a massively overachieving situation for them to be in League One. And I think that was a fantastic effort to get themselves out of League Two. And that'll be some of the happiest days at the football club when you're playing a team for the first time ever in your professional history, as we were as Pompey fans this season, both home and away. And we haven't played them at Fratton Park yet. You know that they're kind of a little bit in unknown and uncharted waters, really. Sadly, I think they're probably, I don't know how far off they are being mathematically down, but they look pretty down and out of it, don't they? They are a good chunk even away from 23rd, let alone being safe in League One. So yes, I think they're down. I think new manager perhaps has not had the desired effect that it probably would have liked to have done, which is a shame really, because I think when Big Dunk, as he's known, came in, there was a kind of renewed sense of, maybe Forest Green could turn this around, but that hasn't proven to be the case, and that's probably the reason why I put them 24th, Jack.
Yeah, that they're struggling, and I think you mentioned Duncan Ferguson. Also, I think the transfer window, we were both here, like I said at the start, speaking about the transfer window. We spoke about deadline day, but also reflected on the entirety of January, and there were quite a few moves, and Burton was one, and Forest Green Rovers was another sort of underrated window. You're right. I think the lack of manager boost and the lack of transfer boost. I think Charlie Savage has done quite well on loan from Manchester United. He has had quite an impact. But other than that, I look at the names they've brought in and the lack of impact. Bakayoko joined from Bolton. Has he really made that big step up that Forest Green Rovers needed? Maybe not him on an individual basis, but certainly that squad needed with his introduction. It hasn't really happened. Jake, I imagine you're going to reiterate what we've just said there. But Forest Green Rovers, they've struggled this season and probably will be going down.
Yeah, I think so. That it's highly unlikely that, if we're setting the benchmark at 47 points, 48 points, I can't see them getting 25 from the next 10, certainly. So I think Forest Green will be the obvious ones. Like you said, Big Dunk is, you thought it was going to be some sort of firefighter coming and sort of, go back to basics like Dino Marmry has done at Burton. Completely the opposite effect. Hasn't really worked out. They play some good football at times, I think. Jordan Garrick's been a really astute signing from Swansea. But they don't get the ball towards the top end of the pitch enough to utilise the likes of Bakayoko, Garrick on a regular basis. So, unfortunately, Forest, I think they'll do really well in League Two next season because they've got some really good young players on the books. They signed a lad, McCann, who I think he was at Rangers but came through at Man United. Him in League Two could be pretty scary, but for Forest Green, I think it's been a year of achievement, like Tom said. To get to this level has been fantastic as a football club. But I think they'll be strong next year, like I say. And we might. I don't think we've seen the back of Forest Green. I think they'll be back in a couple of years.
Yeah, I agree on all of those points from the both of you. Let's do it in the way that we said we were, with you, Tom, naming the other 3 teams you reckon will go down. There's a lot of candidates, not just the ones that are currently in there. MK Dons are currently in there, but Accrington are just outside the bottom 4 as a recording. Oxford, Burton, and you probably have to add Cheltenham in the conversation. I think Fleetwood are safe at this point. I'm pretty comfortable in saying that. But from Cheltenham downwards, anybody's in the mix. Who have you got? You've got other 3 clubs, name and shaming, unfortunately, to be relegated.
Yeah, it's not a nice conversation to have, and I much prefer talking about the second half of this video, Jack, to be honest with you. But we've got to go for it. And I would actually say at the time of recording, which is important to stress, on Thursday, the 16th of March, I would go as it is, as you were in terms of relegation. I would go MK Dons in 21st, Morecambe 22nd, Cambridge 23rd, and then bottom of the league would be Forest Green. I'm disappointed to say about Cambridge, because I actually thought when we went there a couple of weeks ago, just it's a well-known phrase in football from some of the struggling teams in at the bottom of divisions particularly, but that lack of clinical edge and the ability to finish those chances that are presented to you is something that screamed to me for Cambridge. And losing those games by the fine margins and those moments not going your way has been the downfall of their season. Although, having said that, the stats don't lie. They've lost 22 at the time of recording, which has only been worsened, or Forest Green have only gone one worse than them and losing 23. So, they are well out of it. They're 5 points from safety at this moment in time, Cambridge. And I think, unfortunately for them, maybe the fact that MK Dons the other week didn't quite go the way they wanted it to. And again, that was another game where they probably could have, should have, would have got a goal or two in that one. I think they had one ruled out for offside, if I'm not mistaken. So there's that. Do you want me to keep talking about Morecambe and Milton Keynes and then move on to Jake, do you?
Yeah,
cool.
I think that's probably the best way of doing it.
Morecambe's a place that we could only draw at this season, and it was one of those. It's always, I don't think we've ever actually won there. We haven't won for a long time, Pompey, in the league at Morecambe, and it's one of those where it's a bit like a Fleetwood ground, isn't it? And I don't like to categorise. You probably throw Accrington into that mix, where if you go there and the conditions are against you, where they were at Accrington when we went there the other day, you can sometimes come away with a slightly underwhelming result. And I think Morecambe's one of those places where the fact that Cole Stockton hasn't quite hit the heights that he did last season has really damaged them in terms of the goals they've scored. He's only scored 4 at the time of recording, which is nowhere near where he was.
Such a drop off from last year.
Exactly. And, Jensen Weir's doubled his goal record, and he's a midfielder. So you just sort of sat there thinking, well, what on earth's going on there? That's no disrespect to Jensen Weir, but at the same time, you'd expect your number 9 to be at least double figures by this point, even for a relegation-stricken side. So that would be my concern for Morecambe. And then MK Dons, again, I just think it's been spoken about so many times, the Scott Twine, Harry Darling argument, but I think it's so true that they've lost significantly. Obviously, the manager at the time when those two were at the club is now managing your team, Jack. So it's one of those, isn't it, where you look at it's one of those where you're kind of. I'm sure you are. I'm excited for you as well. I'm a bit worried about coming to your place. You're going to be there, aren't you? In a couple of weeks.
I'll be there.
Good lad. I think for that short period where Dean Lewington was kind of in charge / player manager, I know they got a result against us. Things haven't really got any better under Mark Jackson, have they? And unfortunately, they are kind of stricken to the bottom. The only thing I would say, a little bit of fighting spirit, although they've gone sort of 5 or 6 games without a win in the league, MK Dons, since they beat Bristol Rovers back in early February. They did get that result last weekend against Cambridge, which I think is a real kind of, I know 6-pointer in a relegation battle was very easy to come by, but it really was for them. So maybe there's a little bit of fighting spirit left in there, which is why they'd be just the last team for me to go down. And the only reason why I wouldn't put Accrington Stanley, and spoiler alert, some of these boys are going to chat about Accrington Stanley in a moment, is we went there on Tuesday night, and as I mentioned, conditions weren't fantastic. They're far from fantastic. They didn't look like the side that, Jake said they were the worst he'd ever seen. I didn't feel that way. And we were talking about maybe that's partly the way Pompey played that night, rather than talking more and speaking more volumes about Accrington Stanley. But, they hit the bar twice, had a man sent off, the goalkeeper sent off early doors. So, the circumstances to that game. But again, it doesn't, the position they find themselves in doesn't lie. They are incredibly close, and they're hovering just 2 crucial points above the drop zone, and could very easily be chucked into it early doors, late doors. Is late doors a saying? Early doors.
It can be. No, you made it up. I think it works well. It works well.
Chucked in. It works late doors. There you go. A bit of Riley Towler for you. Those would be my 4, Jack, and I would probably stick with it as it is right now.
So yes or no, Oxford will remain a League One side.
Oxford will remain a League One side for
Lovely.
next season.
And that is the end of the episode. Jake, we'll come to you with Accrington because, like you said there, Tom has thrown you under the bus by saying you don't rate Accrington this season, which is fair enough. We'll come to you and we'll discuss that further. I've written down a few notes with Accrington, and we spoke briefly off camera about it. I think finally having to accept that maybe, and Accrington are in my bottom four, unfortunately. I'm finally accepting that maybe this sort of experience-driven mentality of John Coleman and the fact that he's been there for so long, he's kept them up for so long, and they've been punching above their weight for such a long period of time. Is that now wearing off? And are we having to look at a squad right now that maybe is not capable of staying in League One? They've still got to play Oxford and Cambridge, but I worry about those other games. They've got to play Bolton still, Sheffield Wednesday, Pompey, Peterborough, Plymouth. Now, if I'm looking at those fixtures, I'm petrified and I'm seriously doubting my ability to stay in League One, especially this season. Like I said, they have got some 6 points in there, MK Dons, us and Cambridge, but those big fixtures against the sides that are in and around the top 6, the top end of the table for sure, they're going to make it really difficult. Have Accrington got enough to stay in this league, do you think?
Unfortunately not. I think the thing that kept Accrington up, one of the main reasons was the home form. Last year, they were really good at the Wham Stadium. This year, that's completely disappeared. Another massive reason as to why Accrington have had such a drop-off is the man in the top right, Colby Bishop, signing for Pompey from Accrington. Colby Bishop scored some really key goals for Accrington last year and keeping them up, and he's done a very good job at Portsmouth that Tom could tell you about in a lot more detail. I think it's 20 goals in all comps this year now for him. You lose 20, 15, 20 goals in a side like Accrington, you are losing an awful lot of points. I just didn't think they recruited well enough either, really. They brought in Presley in January, but was it too late to bring in someone of his sort of stature and calibre? Maybe it was, but yeah, they just haven't impressed me. I've seen them twice. They picked up a point. We took 4 points off them. I watched them. I think it was the start of Feb. Actually, they were awful. They were woeful. On the floor almost every couple of minutes. They were hoofing the ball up to Sean Wally, who is not technically a midget, but he could well be. But yeah, they're just not a good football side for me, Jack. And ultimately, I think John Coleman, as good as a gaffer that he is, and I really rate the job that he's done down at Accrington, but I just don't think sentiment's going to keep them as a League One side, and ultimately I think they're going to fall underneath that dotted line.
It's interesting what you say about goals as well. We look at the sides you've mentioned there, Cambridge, Morecambe, Accrington. There's one common theme there. Where are the goals coming from? Cambridge last season, you could look at Joe Ironside, you could look at Sam Smith, not quite there. Morecambe, you could look at Cole Stockton last season, not there. Accrington, Colby Bishop last season, he's not even at the football club physically anymore. There's a bit of a trend there. These sides are struggling to score goals and leaking way too many. Cambridge, that Tom mentioned there, I think if you've watched the channel for a while, myself and Cambridge and myself and in particular Mark Bonner, we've got something going on, and he's yet to comment on the videos, and he will. I'm sure he will. I'll send him a text if they do go down, and I'll say I'm really sorry that I couldn't keep you up through my kind words throughout the entire season. I was really impressed by Cambridge last year. I was really impressed by him, but this season has been such a drop off. Is it true in football? Is second season syndrome a thing? I mean, Cheltenham have managed to. I think we're comfortable in saying keeping staying up and keeping themselves safe. But Cambridge that have really struggled. They had a really good campaign last season. They just sort of dropped off again this year. What do you think, Jake?
Yeah, Cambridge are a similar sort of case to Accrington for me. They've not. They were also built on a very strong home record at the Abbey. They were fantastic there last year. They've been decent there this year. It's just away from home, they are absolutely woeful. They came to us a couple of weeks ago. They never looked like they wanted to win the game of football. And maybe it's because Joe Ironside's not performing to the levels that we saw last year. And, staying in the league when you're not supposed to is perhaps easier than when you raise a little bit of expectation, which I think Cambridge might have done over the summer with some of the players they brought in. And when you raise expectation, then if you fail, it's a massive problem. And ultimately, Bonner's stock is probably never been lower because he came into the job, got promoted straight away, and then was linked to the Rotherham job. Didn't take the Rotherham job due to some sort of things that went up a bit in Rotherham, and then ever since then, it's sort of just gone on a massive downward spiral for him. And I just think that's happening with Cambridge. And again, like Forest Green, I think they'll be decent in League Two. I think they'll compete in League Two. but they've just not shown the fighting spirit or the quality. Tom mentioned there the game against MK Dons the other week. That's a real opportunity to go and make a statement and go, we're going to beat one of the teams that are down there with us, and they weren't able to do that, and hardly really trouble Forest Green in any capacity. So, yeah, Cambridge for me, Jack, are certainly ones that they're going to be down. I can't see them picking up enough points between now and the first week in May.
So to clarify, MK Dons are also going to get relegated. Morecambe are going to stay up in your eyes.
Yes, yeah. For me, Morecambe, and do you know what it is? We do some stuff with a guy called Joel, who's a Morecambe podcaster. He raves to me about their midfield, and to be honest, I'm sort of getting on his sort of vibe now. Shaw, who was at Sheffield Wednesday a couple of years ago, he's been fantastic for them. Tom mentioned Jensen Weir. I think Jensen Weir would be a very smart pickup for Pompey in the summer, actually, on loan from Brighton. He's had a pretty good year. I believe he was at Cambridge the year before, and he's a fantastic player. They brought in Dan Crowley as well, who had a really good debut. I think on his debut, it's when they beat Burton 5-0. I think he got 3 assists and scored twice. So he's made an impact. But the goals of Cole Stockton are being shared out. They had a loanee from Huddersfield, Phillips, earlier in the year. He was pretty decent. They had a Mellor, who I know who's injured. He scored a couple. They've just got something about them, Morecambe. Derek Adams, for me, is a really good gaffer at this level. Didn't do great with Plymouth, but I think he's better with the underdog tag, as some managers are. I think Danny Cowley probably falls under that bracket as well. But I just think Morecambe have got a bit about them. I think their home record's really impressive, and I think they're going to be the ones to climb out of it and put Accrington right in the mud.
Yeah, so we've touched on the bottom fours there. I'd go with Forest Green Rovers, definitely to finish 24th. I'm sorry, but I think they are in a position now where they just can't physically do it, but they can mathematically do it. I just can't see it. I think it's 7 points from 23rd. They've got a real chase on.
We've seen their run as well, Forest Green.
It's not nice, is it?
Yeah, who they've got to play. It's all over, mate, I'm afraid. It's curtains.
I've got the fixtures here. Plymouth next. They've got Sheffield Wednesday, Pompey and Derby, and then Wycombe away, Barnsley. I'm sorry, Forest Green Rovers. I try and see if I can ring someone up and call it the season now. I don't think that's going to be possible. Cambridge, Morecambe and Accrington. I just got MK Dons to stay up, and I know it's going against both of what you've got to say. I think it's because I'm deluded in the fact that there is quality in that squad. There is quality. They have got those individuals there. They just seem to be very young. They haven't gelled, and I've been saying through the season, I think it will come good enough, basically. I don't think it's going to come good anyway. They're definitely going to be down the bottom there, but I think long term they're probably going to be okay because they have invested in young players. They sold Scott Twine, Harry Darling, that was mentioned earlier by Tom, but they have reinvested that money in different ways. They've got 2 Irish lads. I think Burns is one of them. I've completely forgotten the other one. They got Harvey. They invested as well. They've got these sort of younger lads that I think will eventually, when they have gelled and they have got that sort of the structure from top to bottom clicking, you'd like to think that there's positive signs ahead for MK Dons, but right now maybe I'm in the wrong boat. But I'm going to stick with what I've said. I think MK Dons will just about stay up with the bottom 4 of Accrington, Morecambe, Cambridge United and Forest Green Rovers. Let's touch on really quickly before we move on to the top 6, the sides that we've got to stay in the league then. The 2 teams we're going to touch on. Cheltenham, I think we can all agree are going to be fine. I don't think we need to sort of go into too much detail about that. Cheltenham had a good season. I think we should, considering their expectation, I think a lot of people at one point did see them to go down, but it seems as though Wayne Elliott has steered them out of trouble after, of course, the departure in the summer of Michael Duff. He seems to have stepped up and done a good job. I look at Burton and Oxford United. You've all kept Oxford out of your bottom 4, and that does give me too much happiness for just 2 other people saying that they're going to stay up. You can't physically guide us through these tough times, but you have kept us away from trouble and in League One next season. New manager, a big game, and I want to sort of touch on these next 2. We've got Morecambe and Cheltenham as our next 2 games. Those are huge. Tom, I mean, I'm telling you, they're huge. Do you agree? I feel as though they are in. I don't like saying it. Must wins, relegation 6 pointers. It all comes under that sort of category.
I think the most important part about those 2 games is the fact that you haven't, last 5 games, 0 points registered, and you are literally the worst form side in the division. Forest Green have got 1 point more than you in their last 5 games because they registered a draw. So I think the fact that, yes, Liam Manning needs to hit the ground running, I think that's really important. I think the fact that it's Morecambe and that is, we've said that, other than Jake, did you say that Morecambe were going to go down, Jack?
No.
I did. Jake's gone to
Okay,
stay up.
so it's 66% of us reckon that Morecambe are going to go down. So it's that's important. Although I would say yes, they're really crucial games, but they're also against teams that are going to be fighting for the points just as much as you are. It's not a case of free hits against teams who are mid-table and are kind of starting to get on the beach in terms of 10 games to go. It's actually, particularly for the first one against Morecambe away from home, that's very much one that they'll be fighting for as well. So, but I back you. I think the manager turnaround is coming in at just the right time. I mean, you haven't had it easy, to be honest with you, have you, Jack? You know, you Plymouth and Derby in your last 5, at Lincoln away from home. You know, we struggled there, and a lot of teams have. And Jake's absolutely delighted that we've managed to get that in there for the going up and going down video. But yeah, I think that it's incredibly important that he hits the ground running. I think for his own personal pride and for the team themselves as well. Yeah, but absolutely, he cannot continue on the trend, because otherwise you are a beeline to be in that all important R-word conversation. But I think just about we'll be able to say in a week's time, probably with more certainty, where you'll have a bit more of a wider smile on your face, chat. But I think just about you'll be okay. Just a quick one on Cheltenham, if I may, as well. I think I was genuinely concerned for them when we turned them over 4-0 written all over at our place, and then when they had to go to Derby and they lost there as well, and they were on a real downward trajectory, and they were making a proper beeline. I think results recently, turning Peterborough over 3-0. I mean, come on, that is, and that goal is goal of the season, full stop. There's nothing that will top it. That was scored from the halfway line by Alfie May. And, there's a big win against Fleetwood of recent times, and a point against you boys as well, Jake, that wasn't too long ago either. So steadying the ship's absolutely right. And I'm pleased that Cheltenham have managed to steer themselves away from it. And you mentioned other teams that are away from it as well. We mentioned at the top of this video, Burton and the fact that Dino steadied the ship. I actually think one of the catalysts for Burton's relative success in recent weeks has been their excellent transfer window in January. I think that's really taken them away from the depths of where they might have otherwise been. And I know they're still teetering on the edge of it. They're not an awful long way, and they're not 100% safe by any means. And I think we should take everything that we say in this video with a pinch of salt, because at the time of recording, we still have, for some teams, 10, 11 games to go. Some teams it's 9, sometimes it's 11. So some teams it's even more than that in Barnsley's case. So you want to be careful with what you say, but I think, you're right in what you're saying with kind of the 2 yellows in terms of Burton and Oxford, and then Cheltenham well away from that fight. I don't know how you feel, Jakey boy.
Yeah, I think, just to touch on Cheltenham as well, I think the difference that they've got to the teams down the bottom is they've got a goal scorer that's scoring goals this year, and Alfie May. Whether they can keep a hold of him in the summer will be really fascinating to see if he wants to stick around, or whether I think he's 30 this year, so he probably might want to get a move up to the Championship or a top end League One team. So I think that's the difference. Oxford, for me, I think will be fine. These next 2 games, as long as you don't lose them, I think that will be job done for you guys. As important it is to perhaps win these games, not losing it is pretty important as well. And I'm saying that we've drawn 18 games this year, so I think 2 points would be pretty good for Oxford. And then Burton, I think since Dino's come in, I think they've been around sort of 12th, 13th, 14th in the form table ever since he came in. So they were never going to sort of drop down into League Two. I think they've got too much quality. And like Tom says, the excellent window that they brought in Charlie Kirk was a really eye-watering signing. Sam Lavelle as well from Charlton. So, yeah, I think those sort of teams are going to be okay. And fortunately, circumstances sort of play with them a little bit, that they might have a little bit of breathing room come, 4 or 5 weeks from now.
I think Burton's turnaround's been really good. I thought at the start of the season they were shipping so many goals, they were destined to go down. But like you said, Dino's really steadied the ship and got them away from trouble. And again, just really before we move on to the top 6, I look at Oxford in these next 2 games. They feel as though if you win them, it's so good, but if you lose them, it's so bad. Let's move on to the top 6 then, because this is even more competitive. Maybe not exactly in terms of fighting to get in those playoff places, but the organisation, should I say, of those positions are going to be really, really quite, I'm going to use the word again, fascinating, and it really could go either way. Tom, we're going to come to you. Let's all touch on our 6th place side first, actually. Who would you go with to get in there? Because there's a bit of a discussion as to whether or not it's going to be that top six we currently have, and I'll run through it now. Happy to do that. Bolton are currently in sixth, then Derby County, Barnsley, Ipswich, and the top two currently consists of Plymouth and Sheffield Wednesday. Sixth is currently Bolton Wanderers. Tom, your sixth place at the end of the season. Have you got Bolton in there?
I think I have, yes. I think that's what I'm going to go for, with the kind of asterisk at the end. And I mean, I know this is, people are already probably in the comments already, but I would look to 10th place to say that's where your conversation begins in terms of the latecomers, the late to the party, late arrivals. And I include Wycombe, Peterborough, Shrewsbury and Pompey in that conversation. And I would at this moment in time. My one thing with Bolton would be, yes, I think they've pulled off some fantastic wins. And when they went 2 games on the trot, beating teams 5-0, I thought, right, here we go. This is a team that are charging for autos. Hasn't quite ended up being that way in the last couple of weeks. And I know at the time of recording we've got Sheffield Wednesday, Bolton to come tomorrow night, which is very exciting. And I think that Jack's talking about the fascinating run. I think that's one of those real kind of top billing League One games this season that we'll earmark, look back on and go, wow, that was a moment and a half. I think the fact that they've lost to Pompey and Ipswich, both by a 2-goal margin in the last week or so, the last couple of weeks, has kind of put a little bit of a dent in what was otherwise a really gleaming moment and season that they've had so far. As I said, they've had some fantastic wins. I think James Trafford between the sticks has been absolutely awesome. I think he's probably been one of their best players this season. And when you've got, we felt like it when we had Gavin Bazunu in goal for us last season, when you've got that keeper that you can be so dependent upon, then you've got a real recipe for success. And that would probably why I'd put Bolton in 6th place, but with a little bit of an eye on those 7th, 8th, 9th and 10th place teams, just because there's still a decent wad of games to go and plenty of points to play for.
So I'm happy to cut this out if you make me do it, but can you run through what you said before the video started? With Pompey, you've got those games there. There's outsider's chance that you're happy to admit it's definitely not something that's guaranteed, or certainly not likely either, but there is a way. It's not completely dinner buried for a side like Pompey, who currently are in 10th.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. There's probably a single figure percentage chance of us getting into the playoffs, and I'm fully aware of that. And there'll be a lot of people watching going, well, he's a Pompey fan, of course he's going to say this. But my feeling would be, and it's something that I've seen across Twitter in the last couple of days as a result of that away gritty performance at Accrington, where we came away as 3-1 comfortable winners, but perhaps the reflection of the game wouldn't have suggested that, is that if Bolton do lose to Sheffield Wednesday at Hillsborough, which, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if the bookies back Wednesday on tomorrow night, because they've been superb, and we'll have a long conversation, I'm sure, about Sheffield Wednesday towards the end of the video. But if Bolton do lose that game, Pompey beat Port Vale and Bristol Rovers in the next couple of weeks, or Bristol Rovers and Port Vale, I should say, respectively, which, again, winnable games. And Jake said it at the time when we were having the conversation that it's doable. We would then be 3 points off the playoffs with 8 games still left to run of the season. Now, you don't have to be a Pompey fan or not a Pompey fan. You just have to be able to see that League One, or be a League One fan as a whole, to think that actually that's very much a gap that is closable over the course of 8 games and with 24 points to play for. Again, we're talking in hypotheticals, and I'm fully aware of that. But when there is just that 3-point gap instead of what is currently a 9-point gap, then you're talking about a different story. Obviously, there is the small matter of 3 teams in between us, and we know that Shrewsbury have a really, really tough April to come. They play ourselves at home. I know that they've got to play Charlton, which is never easy. They've obviously got to go to Barnsley. They've got Plymouth at home and Bolton away. And Sheffield Wednesday is the last weekend of April for them. So that is an absolutely ridiculous April for them. And I think Shrewsbury, without wanting to be disrespectful, I think by the time the 29th of April comes round, they will be well down and out of the playoff conversation. I think Peterborough, again, with me, it's kind of, and you actually mentioned it there, Jack, in terms of whether you are it's going to be so good if you win and so good if you lose. That's kind of summarized Peterborough's season, really. They haven't drawn at all, really, have they? How have they only drawn 3? They either win or they lose. So, and obviously Wycombe without Gareth Ainsworth now. So my 6th place would be Bolton, and the asterisk is all of what I've just said there. But please don't hate me in the comments for going, oh, Pompey got a chance, because I've given you a very hypothetical situation, and within a week I could be proven completely wrong, and Bolton might pull an absolute stormer at Hillsborough. We don't know. Let's see.
I mean, Bolton are the favourites, and that is because they are the current final side in those playoff places. And Jack, come to you now. The running is really important. We haven't really spoken about that word enough, but that is important. Teams have got to, surprise, surprise, play different clubs in these next 10 weeks and 10 games, and that is going to play a part. They played against each other. They played against rivals for these positions. Bolton have got a fairly, dare I say it, I don't like using this word in League One, but they've got a nicer run, if we're being fairly frank. They have got an EFL Trophy final that could be a potential distraction. But then after that, you're looking at Exeter, Cambridge, Oxford, Burton, Shrewsbury, like I said, are one of those rivals in there, Accrington, Fleetwood, and then the final day, Rovers away. Like I said, I don't like using the word nice in League One because I think even Bolton fans will not like me saying that. That is potentially tempting fate. But they've got games in there that if they are a serious contender for a playoff place, they should be winning those games.
Yeah, I agree that there's definitely at least 7 or 8 games in that run that you've told me there that Bolton will be going into thinking that we can pick up a positive result of some kind. The problem with run-ins and things like that are they get a lot harder towards the end of the season because teams have got more to play for. Even those teams that are going to be down there, we spoke earlier off air about maybe Pompey having an easier run-in. Those teams that are down the bottom are fighting for their absolute lives and they want to stay in the division. So going to maybe a Morecambe or an MK Dons is going to be a lot more difficult now than what it was perhaps
It's a great
2-3 months ago. So look, I understand that Bolton have got a fairly easy run, and that they're coincidentally my pick to finish in 6th. I just think over the course of the season, Bolton have been one of the exceptional sides. They've been relentless a lot of the time. They play some very good football. Ian Evatt has got a lot of power in that dressing room. I think he's brought in a lot of good players. You mentioned, Tom mentioned there, James Trafford, who's a regular now for England under 21s. They've got Conor Bradley, who has had a fantastic year on loan from Liverpool. They've got an array of strikers that they can pick from. So if Bodvarsson's not working, if Charles isn't working, they can bring on Victor Adebayo, who had a really good half a season at Burton. So for me, the depth that Bolton have got and the manager, I think if Bolton aren't going up, I think Ian Evatt might be offered a job in the division above. I just can't write Bolton off finishing in the top 6 purely because, as I say, they've got the star power and they've got a lot of depth in the squad.
Yeah, I think we're all going to agree on Bolton coming 6th. I've got a Discord server, and you can join that Discord server. It's free of charge, and we have constant discussion there. I've got a few Bolton fans who are a little bit worried about it, but what I will say is there's more than just a short term. There's more than just that short term bias of the recent form. They have got games to go. And as long as the last sort of few weeks that have been poor for their standard doesn't derail their season, they've certainly got the quality in that squad. They've certainly got the manager, and they've got the fan base as well. They've got a really, really good fan base. They're going to have that real edge there. They are a big club that should be, in their eyes, based on history and stature. And I don't like using it because I don't think fan bases deserve to necessarily sort of feel entitled to get out of the league. But in terms of the football club in itself, it is a championship club. I think we're pretty fair in saying that. But of course, that doesn't get you very far. But that will be an extra boost, I feel, in these key moments in the running, the business end of this campaign. Let's go to 5th then, because again, it doesn't necessarily mean individuals and who could be doing it. It's more about the order in which we've gone with. 5th place, Tom, who have you got in there?
I'm going to go with Derby County for 5th place, I think, Jack. And I know that's exactly where it is at the moment. There was a period of time this season, I think it was probably at the beginning of Paul Warren's tenure at Derby County, where I was like, oh my word, these boys are absolutely unstoppable. And they are going to be, there was a conversation about automatic promotion for Derby County. And at that time I was like, right, well, here we go. Derby County are going to be the dark horses that have kind of been bubbling under the water, and no one's really noticed what kind of results they're pulling off. And then unfortunately in recent times you kind of earmark the away loss to Wycombe and being turned over 4-1 at Oakwell, losing to Plymouth. And I know that was probably a contentious one, and Derby fans watching this will probably feel like they should have at least had a point from that game as a result of a dodgy Charles Breakspear refereeing decision, which we've never seen any of those before. And then obviously, they weren't, I think Oxford United gave them a good old run for their money, and you're going to be able to tell us a lot more about that game, I'm sure. But to be only come out with that one with a 3-2 away win, they've had a struggle in recent times. They're 2-2 draw against Shrewsbury in the last couple of weeks as well. So I think it'll be Derby. I think you mentioned fan bases there. I think Derby is another one to add to the list. And to be honest with you, all of the current top six have fan bases deserving of Championship football. I think there's probably slightly more in the likes of Wednesday, Derby, Bolton, and Ipswich favour than there are for the other two in terms of fan base. But nevertheless, I think they're fantastically well supported clubs in that conversation. My one thing with Derby would be, and it's probably why I haven't put them higher, is that their run, and we're mentioning all these teams run whatever, we've got no idea how they're going to fare. But to have a week where you've got to go to Peterborough and then host Ipswich, and there's still a decent crop of teams there, and that final day, I mean, that is just going to be unbelievable at Hillsborough for whatever might be riding on it. And of course there is the small matter of Pompey going to Pride Park on the penultimate game as well. So there's still a few tasty ones in there for Derby County, but I mean, no doubt that they are going to be a playoff side this season. I think they will be that fifth place team, and won't quite break into those top two playoff spots.
Jake, I'll come to you. Before we do the Derby County deep dive, the final day of the season that Tom mentioned there, on the 7th of May, Sheffield Wednesday versus Derby, that could be the day that Sheffield Wednesday are crowned champions and Derby secure a top 6 spot. Is it going to be in 5th? We'll have to wait and see. Do you see them in that top 6?
Yeah, Derby have been really impressive, I think, since Paul Warne took the job, like Tom rightly said. I thought actually at the start of the season that when they appointed Liam Rosenior, I thought that was a fantastic appointment as a really good coach. As someone that went to the university and was quite close to the football club, Liam Rosenior had the brains behind the Wayne Rooney management era at Derby County, and I think that's sort of showing now at Hull. I think he's doing a really good job up there. But they went out and spent the money and got Paul Warne in from Rotherham, who's a serial promotion winner at this level as well. But yeah, the one worry for me for the start of the season for Derby was the squad depth. Obviously, they were under embargo; they didn't know who they were going to bring in. But then they had that one day where they brought in Hourahan, McGoldrick, and Chester, and you thought, "Now these boys are going to be absolutely fine, aren't they?" And Derby County can attract those sort of players at this level because, like you say, of the history of the football club, of the Brian Clough era, that sort of stuff, and they've been really good. I think they timed their run wrong into the top 2. They didn't time it at the right time. I think there's another club that I'm certainly going to come on to that I think have done the right thing. But I just think they're a really good outfit. They know what they're good at. My concern at the moment with Derby, and they've got a lot of left-footed players in that team. So they have 2
very specific.
A lot of left-footed centre-backs.
This man's done his research.
Well, they have a centre back. They play with Forsyth and Aaron Cashin, who are both left-footed. Conor Hourahan,
Roberts in that team as well, isn't he?
Hayden Roberts at left back is left-footed. You've also got Conor Hourahan in midfield, who is left-footed, and I think that gives a little bit of air of predictability around how they're going to play. But to be honest, over the last sort of 3 to 4 months, it doesn't matter if you know how Derby are going to play because Derby are going to beat you. So. Derby comfortably in 5th for me. I don't think there's any danger of them dropping out.
I'd agree. I'm sorry we're repeating ourselves all the time. I promise there will be a slight change as we head further up the League One table, but I think Derby County, I've got them finishing in 5th, and I'd reiterate what has been said there. They've got a really good squad. A little bit sloppy, I think, at home in recent weeks. We touched on that a couple of weeks ago. Lincoln City, I'm not saying that dropping points to Lincoln City is sloppy, but it certainly is something that maybe at Pride Park you should be getting the result. I think, Jake, you'll be happily admitting that even though you are a Lincoln fan, Derby in that top 6 at home to Lincoln City, they're going to make it difficult, but you should see through that if you are looking for a top 2 push. Like you said there, probably timed it a little bit wrong. You mentioned it, and I want you to repeat it if you may. A little bit sloppy at home. What you saw against Lincoln City, could they have done a little bit better in that moment?
Yeah, I think so. But to be honest, they probably should have won the game because of the 3 goals that were scored that night, the 2 that stood were both offside, and the one that didn't stand was on the only goal that was onside that David McGoldrick scored. The only the concerns for Derby that night was that we went down to 10 men pretty much at 1-0, and we didn't really want to give them an inch. And when Lincoln don't want to give anybody an inch, and the clean sheet stats will prove that we're pretty difficult to get around. Pompey have had 2 blanks against us this year. A lot of very good teams haven't been able to score against us. So, yeah, I think perhaps if Derby are to stay in League One next year, and hopefully for them they won't be doing, I feel like a creative number 10 would really help them unpick the lock a few more times, and they might be able to then give the likes of McGoldrick and players in the forward areas, whoever they have next year, a little bit more ammunition to go and kill off games like Lincoln, like Fleetwood, Morecambe, whoever it is at Pride Park next year.
Yeah, amazing stuff. Let's go to fourth place. Tom, who have you gone with? This is probably where things can get a little bit more varied. Who have you gone with in fourth?
This is where we're going to start upsetting people, I think, Jack. I've gone for Ipswich Town in fourth place for the end of the season. I've already upset Jake. And I do it for very good reason, and I think I'm going to provide enough evidence in my next couple of words to say that Ipswich will be a fourth. Were you reacting because that's where you've put them, or were you reacting because you think I'm wrong? Oh, okay, that's right then.
And
okay,
also, I put them there as well. So
there we go.
So varied, maybe not so much varied. Let's move on to Barnsley for varied. Let's carry on with Ipswich because that isn't so different.
Yes. Okay. Well, the reason why, and you're probably all going to echo my sentiment here. The weekend of the 25th of March and then Saturday the 1st of April, they'll travel to Oakwell and Pride Park, and I think they're going to pick up 0 points from those two games. And people might go back and go, "What an absolute plonker he was to say that when they've won both the games." But I think away from home is where they've lost games this season. They've only lost once at Portman Road this season, which is ridiculous. And we're talking, yes, okay, here we go. I knew as soon as I said that, there was going to be a little reaction from the bottom of your screen. They've also got a trip to Peterborough it's the kind of the penultimate game of the season as well. Other than that, we've spoken about how you should take easy games with a pinch of salt already on the video tonight. But I think they have got a pretty clear sort of run of games where Shrewsbury at home is not by any means a walkover for them, and obviously Wycombe as well. They've got to play on Good Friday. I should have pointed that one out as well. So
Derby away is going to be difficult.
So Barnsley and Derby, those two, and then followed by Wycombe. So there's probably 3 games in there where they're not going to pick up very many points. I say that Ipswich have been relentless at points as well this season, and we should give them an awful lot of credit for what they've built. I think it would be a catastrophic failure of investment if they don't go up this season, given the amount of money that they've spent. That's not me saying I hope they don't go up, but that is me saying that if they do not go up, then there are going to be probably question marks around Portman Road, and people are going to go, well, how on earth have we spent ludicrous amounts of cash and actually have nothing to show for it, or very little to show from it other than a successful season? How are you boys feeling about Ipswich Town? If we're all going for fourth place, what's the reasoning behind it?
Well, it's difficult with Ipswich because I want to come to Jake straight away, and I'll come back to my point on it. But there's the soundbite about the money, because I wanted to touch on that really briefly. I've sort of seen bits on it, and Jake, you might know a little bit more about it than I do. I've sort of seen people's views on throwing this sort of potential. It's not slander, but it's definitely question marks over the fact they have spent by far the most amount of money that any other club has done this season, and probably most League One sides in history. And if they don't go up, I'm still comfortable in saying, how that is it. That is the word. There's some seriously high figures being thrown around, and to be predicted fourth, and of course that then puts you into a playoff position. There's no guarantee. We know how that is almost a lottery, and there's a lot of different ingredients to go into a playoff campaign. You're putting some serious concern around lots of different areas, financial being one.
Yeah, I think the thing with Ipswich as well is they've not actually finished in the playoffs in League One since they've been down here, so it's a new proposition for them if they are to get into the playoffs. And maybe the fans might get on the backs that they miss out on the automatic. So, yeah, I think in terms of Ipswich, I think the money is clearly on the table for everyone to see. They did heavily invested again in January, didn't they? They brought in Nathan Broadhead,
Clark for over
Clark
$1 million
from Stoke as well, who's an Ipswich lad. But I think Broadhead will get the headlines purely because of the 1.5 or whatever, how much it was that they spent for him. They also brought a certain George Hurst into the football club, who I know Tom loves very dearly. But they've invested heavily in that squad. You look at the options that they've got, and there is not a player in there that isn't a very, very good League One player. They're all at least Championship sort of players. They spent £1 million on Leith Davis in the summer as well. So you're thinking this is maybe a 5, 6, 7, £8 million squad, which some Premier League and some Championship teams can't even field, depending on finances and stuff like that. So Yeah, I think Ipswich ultimately, like Tom has said, and like you've said, Jack, are going to have to settle for fourth. I don't think it's any slander on Ipswich. I
No.
think they're a very good footballing side. They're very good at what they do. My concern with Ipswich is they don't really have a plan B, and they can't change. They can't win a game multiple ways. They have their one way of suffocation and try and stranglehold the opposition. And if it doesn't work, then they're not very effective. And it's purely because I think the teams that I've put above them are better than them, and I think they'll finish above them in over a 46 game season, which is why we're doing this. But yeah, Ipswich impressive, but no plan B, which would mean for me they're going to drop down a little bit.
With that budget though, that's a budget built for that is almost a total winning, certainly automatic promotion budget that Kieran McKenna's been given over at the start of the season, the summer, and in January though.
Yeah, massively so. He's been back to the hill. I don't think McKenna can complain. I think of all the targets that he's wanted, he's maybe had to wait on one or two of them. I know he certainly wanted Hurston over the summer and had to wait for him until the January window. But then, is it Kieran McKenna's fault that they can't get promoted on that sort of budget? I don't know, because like I said, without Ipswich playing Championship football next year, I think McKenna is one that will definitely gauge interest from Championship clubs. So, looks difficult. McKenna's done a really good job there. He's kept them, the back door really well shut. They're very good going forward. But like I say, no plan B. If you're bringing that sort of budget, you want to at least try and have a few options so that you can mix it up. And ultimately, I don't think Ipswich have got that in their locker.
I think putting Ipswich in fourth says more about the sides we're going to put above them and the sides that are going to do and have done better, and ultimately through our predictions will do better. But let's wait and see. Let's move to third then. We said that this was going to be varied, or the last one was going to be. Let's hope this one actually might be, because I also do have Ipswich in fourth. I agree with everything that's been said there. And the big point is, like I just said just a second ago, it says more about the sides that are battling it and being relentless in these top three positions. Tom, third spot, just missing out for the automatic promotion spots. Who have you got in third?
I think it's the Green Army, Jack. I've gone for.
So they're going to bottle it.
See, this is the problem.
Surely they can't. I don't see a way. And I said this in the video. And I think I got a little bit of stick for it. But I looked in the camera and I said, surely you can't do it again.
I have an issue with this because I have a bit of a reputation, particularly on this channel and across YouTube, for my comments towards Plymouth Argyle. Some Plymouth fans absolutely love me. Some Plymouth fans would want to be the last person alive on the planet with me. So it's one of those, you got to strike a balance. My issue with Argyle is they do have a history of capitulating when it really matters. Whether that's going to happen this time around, I do not know. As you say, it probably says more about the other sides in the division to do that. They aren't a million miles away from third place as it is. They're only 2 points above where a third place team in Ipswich Town at this moment in time are, having played the same amount of games. The only thing I would counteract that with is Plymouth probably have the easiest run of the current top three teams in League One. I think their only real kind of worrying games would be, I mean, maybe the final was a distraction, as you said earlier. But I mean, the only real one is Shrewsbury in there, isn't it? So, but then as Jake said, look,
and Jake will say Lincoln.
Jake will say Lincoln, of course. There is obviously the small matter of a Devon derby in there as well, which we shouldn't gloss over, because that one is always a form goes out the window game. And Exeter, I thought, were incredibly unlucky, particularly in certain positions they were in the game at Home Park. I know they got turned over in the end, and longevity of Plymouth shined through there. But at their place, anything can happen. That could be a potential banana skin. And then Jake mentioned earlier on that the teams that are down there that Plymouth have got to play are the ones that are going to be absolutely doing whatever they can to scramble for points. I think they are through the worst of it in terms of losing to Peterborough and Barnsley in recent times for kind of the massive drop off in points. I think we spoke about it on this channel a couple of months ago. I think I even earmarked to this point that run of games where they've got these teams to play. I think it probably says more about who I've put first and second than it does Plymouth dropping down into third place. Although it would not surprise me if they did retain that second place finish and finish second place as they are this season. They've lost the most amount of games of any of the top three at the moment at this moment in time as well, Plymouth. So that's maybe something to add into the cauldron when you're having this conversation. What do you reckon, Jakey boy?
Well, we said we're going to disagree here, but I've gone with Argyle in third as well. Like Tom said, I think it's more on what we think of the top two, maybe, than what it is on Plymouth. But they're a really good football side. They are relentless, and they do keep picking up results. I think the momentum has switched when they got beat by Barnsley on the weekend. I just think sometimes a game of that magnitude, and if you go and lose it, it can cause all sorts of problems. And I hate to bring this back to something that I'm familiar with, but when we won the National League under Danny Cowley, we could have gone 12 points behind Forest Green. We went and turned Forest Green over. They were 2-0 up. We won 3-2. We then went on and closed the league gap and won the title convincingly that year. So I think events like that can massively alter the mentality of a team. And whilst Plymouth have been absolutely ruthless this year, that defeat away at Oakwell is going to hurt them in more ways than one. And for me, Argyle have had a really good year, and I would back Argyle in the playoffs if that's where they're to finish. But I just can't look past a certain team that play in South Yorkshire and play in red, which we'll come on to. But yeah, third for Argyle. I'm hoping you disagree with me, Jack, so you don't look like a bit of a fool.
No, I do. I think Plymouth will do it. And the reason for it is, and you mentioned the word there, you used the word mentality. I think you'd like to think they would have learned from last season. And last season was a real capitulation in their eyes. They lost to MK Dons 5-0 at home in the final game of the season. I won't want to remind Plymouth fans of that. I'm sure they'll be, unfortunately, looking back there with quite a lot of disgust and sadness. And it was a really good season. They put themselves into a really good position. And right at the end, it all sort of fell apart in a way that Scott Twine just absolutely stole the show. That was a huge blow for them. I feel as though they're in a position now where they would have learned a lot from that. However, losing to Barnsley, that you just said there, feels as though that could contradict what I've just said, because Barnsley is one of those games where you win that, maybe that point stands really strong, but you lose a game in that manner 3-0 with the games they have got coming up, maybe there is a nicer run there. But I still think I come back to the word mentality in this run-in, lessons being learned. I don't know whether or not all of that does tick the boxes, because that last game against Barnsley, that is a real focus point at this moment, that feels like a huge blow and can't derail their season. I've almost created a point to say why they won't be in the top two, but I think I'm going to sort of go towards lessons being learned and making sure they don't do it again. And I just believe in what Plymouth have done so far this season. It won't allow them to fall out of those top two. So I'm going to see Plymouth in second. In a weird order, we're now going to go to my third, but your second. I'm going to go with Barnsley in third. I'll come back to my points about Barnsley last, but you've got Barnsley higher than third, Tom.
Yeah, I've gone for second place for Barnsley. And I think just very quickly before I speak about Barnsley, I think the fact that you could sit here watching this video and completely agree with Jack, but also completely agree with me and Jake on Plymouth, just shows how kind of.
I mean, even in my point, I've contradicted both sides. I've said that lessons can be learned, but they can also lose to Barnsley 3-0, and that's a massive upset, and that could derail their season. Yeah. Even in me discussing my point, I've contradicted myself, and you're quite right. I think either way, I don't think either side's controversial.
No, I think you're right, and I think that's why you can have the conversation. If there was absolutely a dead cert that Plymouth were going to do it, then and this applies for absolutely every team. But there's a point I'll make a little bit later on, which is what I think separates a couple of sides from each other. On to Barnsley finishing second and in an automatic spot. I think the last couple of weeks has really done it for me. I think Bristol Rovers is a little bit of an anomaly in that, but I think although that had a little bit of ignominy to it, the fact that they've gone and beaten Derby 4-1, ourselves Pompey 3-1, and Plymouth 3-0 in the last couple of weeks just shows that they are mentality kings and they can absolutely do it and just turn up. And I think, yes, they got to go to Wycombe. It's a really exciting game on the 21st of March at Oakwell for Barnsley against Sheffield Wednesday. That's an exciting game outside of any playoff automatic hunt anyway in South Yorkshire, but that will be very exciting. And then obviously the small matter of Ipswich at their place as well. Failing that, they've then got, I know Lincoln are in there, so I do, but Oxford are also in there, so I apologise to you both. other than a potential banana skin on the last day at home to Peterborough, I see them picking up maximum points between that Ipswich game and that game against Peterborough. Perhaps maybe not maximum points, but very close to that. The one thing that separates, and there's no prizes for guessing who I think we've all gone for as top of the league, that separates both the top place finish and Barnsley. Without wanting to blow my own trumpet, I've been at every single one of all 36 games that Pompey have played in this season. I haven't seen a team that have played, or two teams that have played any better than Barnsley and Sheffield Wednesday this season. I think they are in a league of their own in terms of the way they know where each other are, how well acquainted they are with each other, how well drilled, and how they're both playing to their respective managers' common aim in terms of the mentality and the game plan behind how they want to do things. I think Ipswich and Plymouth come very close to that, and that's why they're in respective third and fourth place finishes. But I think Sheffield Wednesday and Barnsley are very much the front runners in terms of the way in which they're conducting themselves. And let's not forget, my final word on Barnsley, they are still 2 games better off than both Plymouth and Ipswich at this moment in time. So they have the most football alongside Sheffield Wednesday to play for the rest of the season. And I'm in no doubt that those games in hand are going to take Barnsley 2 places better than where they are now, and for them to finish in that second spot.
And of course, when we talk about Barnsley, who's steering the ship there, it's Michael Duff. He's done amazing work since he joined from Cheltenham. Jake, Michael Duff, and of course, Barnsley, you are going to disagree with me, but agree with our other guest, Tom. It's going to be a top 2 finish for Barnsley in your eyes.
Yes, and I gave Michael Duff Manager of the Year last year for coming in the top half of mid-table with a Cheltenham size budget. He's been given a really healthy budget at Barnsley. I think that's pretty commonly known. They're not one of the smaller budgets in the league, and it's taken them a bit of time. They didn't set the ground on fire. Obviously, they lost to Plymouth on the opening day. That would have hurt. And since then, I don't think they've really looked back. They've grown into the system that Duff likes to play. The 3 at the back with the 2 up front as well. I think they've been phenomenal. Relentless is the way that I would use to describe Barnes' performance over the last maybe 2 or 3 months. Have been fantastic. Even when they have the disappointing draw of a 0-0 against Bristol Rovers, which is still a good point because Bristol Rovers are a very dangerous side on their day, as Tom might found out on the weekend. That they're a very good side, and Barnsley reacted to that by going and beating the likes of Derby, the likes of Pompey and Plymouth. So for me, it's a combination of having probably a championship ready squad when they came down, but also magnificently down to the manager and the job that he's done to manage expectations and achieve those expectations. For me, in my eyes, I think he will. Just a fantastic coach, a fantastic bloke, and I think he'll be banging on the door for manager of the season for a second year winner.
You mentioned there about, and we've been saying it with the relegation battle and this top 6 battle, beating teams around you in those positions. Derby, Pompey and Plymouth, not just beating them, but 4-1, 3-1 and 3-0. They're convincing results, and you're taking points away from the sides that you're fighting with, but gaining 9 points and with real confidence in there. You've got to really back Barnsley and Michael Duff. And the more I speak, the more I hear you. I'm regretting my decision, but I'm going to stick with it because we're far too into this for me to start changing my mind now. We're with one position left. It's the big one. Who will be crowned champions? I think we can once again go back to the category of agreement in saying that there is only one side that will be crowned League One champions. I said it at the start of the season, and I'm happy that I've got it right for once. I don't normally get the title winners in the correct place, but I think I've done it this time around. I might be saying it too early, but I also don't think I am. Sheffield Wednesday I've gone with to win the league. Tom, Darren Moore's side, they've been on fire.
Yeah, they have. They've been, it's 22, 23 games unbeaten now in League One, which is just unheard of and absolutely ridiculous. They came down to Fratton Park just last week and they did the job on us, absolutely. And there were a couple of question marks raised about some of the comments from some of the boys post-match in terms of the nastiness and the aggressive nature of Sheffield Wednesday. But I think that's probably, they've obviously found that formula to be successful for them. And that's the reason why they've done so well is that they've got the right side of this League One struggle and everyone's trying to get out of, well, all the top 6, top 10, top whatever, trying to get back out of this godforsaken league that these teams have been in for, in some cases, way too long, in some cases only a matter of seasons. but they've done it to a T. And I mean, I said it, I think we said it in the last roundup, Jack. I'm in no doubt that they're going to win the division. And I think
I told it.
There we go. There was the title. So I'm in no doubt that they're going to win the division. I think it speaks themselves. I think I mentioned just now the fact that haven't seen a team be able to find one another, link up the way they do. You know, there's enough coverage on this channel and across our social channels about Barry Bannon. There's an awful lot of quality. Josh Windass is a superb finish that is at Fratton Park in their last game, which was, you know, the difference maker, but it paid off. I'm just so worried for Forest Green at the end of the month, because I think that could be double figures when they go there for the early kickoff. And they've obviously still got to play Lincoln, and they've got pretty favourable run. You know, it's not other than this kind of next week or so, other than that, they're pretty much there until Derby on the final day, which, as we mentioned earlier, could be really, really crucial. So yeah, deserved title winners for me, Sheffield Wednesday this season, Jack.
Jake, top of the table, Sheffield Wednesday currently to finish that way.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt in Sheffield Wednesday. You know, I said that Accrington were the worst team that I've seen. Sheffield Wednesday are by far the best team that I've seen this season. They're more complete. I think you just have to look at the window that they had at the start of the season to bring in Michael Smith from Rotherham, who has scored bags of goals at this level for Rotherham and helped them get promoted, to bring in Michael Ahikwe from Rotherham also, who has got experience of, you know, winning the league and getting promoted through the playoffs as well. Stockdale, who had a blunder in the playoff final last season, but again, it has got promoted out of this division before. And I think if you add that into the mix of the likes of Bannon and Windass and Gregory, who they already had, and Deli Bashiru and
Byers, Volks, to name just a few.
You know what? You could literally go on for half an hour.
Entire squad
for Sheffield Wednesday. That they genuinely are fun, and I don't think they're going to struggle in the Championship next year. That's how good they are. Sort of similar how Burnley are playing in the division above. I think Sheffield Wednesday will be in the Championship to go there and compete. And yeah, like Tom said, they're on a really good unbeaten run at the moment. You know, they don't look like they're going to lose another game this season. Hopefully they do, for my obviously selfish purposes. But yeah, they've been a real pleasure to watch this year. And you know, mentality kings. Tom said it about Barnsley. I'm going to say it about Sheffield Wednesday, because they simply do not know how to lose a game of football. 3 defeats in 34 is fantastic, and deserved winners. As much as it pains me to say, Wednesday and Slim Shady will be back in the Championship where they belong.
Come on, Wednesday. So you mentioned about.
Yeah. He said it. He bottled it in his video, but he's going to say it in mine. So that's I'm happy to see that. Tom, finally, you mentioned about Manager of the Year, Michael Duff, but potentially a title-winning Darren Moore side. Darren Moore, he's some manager and somebody that wasn't given a huge amount of optimism, maybe backing from the fan base at the start of the season. I sort of hear a little bit of uncertainty about Darren Moore and maybe his position, and we're completely confident with him at the helm. But it seems as though they're not going to be too worried now. I think that's a really, really interesting debate to have, but probably settled when we come to the end of the season. Lads, thank you so much for this. It's been such good fun. I think we've got to have to do this probably at the end of the season and reflect maybe on what we've just said.
On how wrong we were.
Over an hour. Maybe. Our Barnes are going to finish the top 2. And I mean, one thing I will say is there will not be a video if Oxford are in that bottom 4. And I'm happy to say that. I don't think I can touch League One for, well, I don't want to think about it. I don't even want to think about it. It's been great fun discussing, breaking down, predicting the top 6 and of course the bottom 4. I'm speaking on behalf of the other 2 and saying these are just predictions and anything can happen. There's so much that can change, so many twists and so many turns.
Put yours in the comment. No, put yours in the comments if you disagree.
I want to hear your thoughts, of course, in the comment section down below. Tom's link will be in there as well. Of course, Jake is from the Stacey West podcast, but potentially some exciting additions to him and to the EFL and League One. We'll just leave it open and maybe
jazz hands, everyone. Jazz hands.
Yes, no one's watching an hour in anyway. It's fine. Get your jazz hands out. And of course, with Jake and Tom, potentially, I want to say too much. You could see more of us in the future this season, maybe not virtually, and that's just how I end it. And that's just maybe how we'll.
It's already said too much. Already said too much.
That's it, really. Thank you so much. Please leave a like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. Give your thoughts. And yeah, we'll see you very, very soon. See you in a bit.